I'm Bobby Burch, and I'm here with Blaine Finch. Mr. Finch is a Republican candidate seeking election in Kansas' new 59th House District, which encompasses northern Franklin County and all of Ottawa. All right, thanks for joining us, Mr. Finch.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate the chance to be here.
Let's get started. All right. So, you served for 4 years as an Ottawa City Commissioner and 1 as Ottawa Mayor. If elected, how do you think your experience will translate to a position with the State House of Representatives?
Well, I think there's a lot of skills that you pick up both in campaigning and talking to people and then in governing, as I have for 4 years. Specifically, you learn to work with people of diverse backgrounds and different perspectives. Not everybody agrees with you on all the issues, and so you learn how to deal with that. You learn how to sit down and listen from time to time and take those perspectives into account. You also learn how to build a consensus and a coalition of people to get things done. So I think that's probably the greatest lesson I will take with me as far as my term as a city commissioner and mayor. We had good successes when I was here. We held the line on taxes. We also got some things done, the wastewater treatment plant. And you learn that it's not always the big, attractive, headline-grabbing projects that need to be done. Sometimes good government is about taking care of the things that have to be taken care of, like infrastructure.
Your opponent in the primary, Terry Lois Gregory, has served in the State House of Representatives before. Why do you think, or why would someone want to consider someone who might not have experience in a state office?
Well, I have not served as a legislator, but I have been in the legislature. I worked as an aide to Representative Ralph Tanner, who was from the 10th District in Baldwin. And then I was hired by the legislature to serve as a paid assistant to the House Education Committee. This has been back about 14 years ago, actually, that I worked up there in the legislature for those folks. So I do have experience with politics. I've taught political science and government, history to college students at Ottawa University. I have a degree in history and political science, so I'm well versed in the process. I understand it. As a trained lawyer, Washburn University School of Law, I have experience there as well. So I get governance and I understand how it works. So I think it's really much closer to an equal footing in this race. But why someone would consider me maybe over my opponent, I think really boils down to, part of it is my stance on the issues, which we're going to get into and talk about today, but also my experience in governance, not only here locally, but in Topeka, and the work that I do here in this community. People know me.
So, kind of taking a step back, why did you choose to run for state office?
Well, actually about 14 years ago I was going to run, and Ralph Tanner had the seat at the time, and he asked me to come help him out, and I did that, and helped Ralph, and he got reelected. And then 10 years ago they redistricted our area, and they split Franklin County up into 4 different House districts. And at that time I was not in a district where I wanted to run against one of the incumbents. I knew those folks at the time. They were doing a good job for the area. And so I just dedicated myself to law school and to starting my business here in Ottawa and building my practice, and put it on hold. This time when the new maps came out and we had Ottawa back in one district together and at least half of Franklin County in that district, I said this is a good opportunity. It was an open seat. There was no incumbent there. Nobody else from this area was running on the Republican side. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to try to go back to the legislature and serve the people that I work with and know here in this community.
Just to give our viewers a better sense of who you are, could you tell me a little bit more about how you're involved in the Franklin County community?
Sure, be glad to. We talked a little bit about my history with city government. I've also been a county councilor for Franklin County. I've taught at Ottawa University. Currently, I work as the Interim Economic Development Director for the Franklin County Development Council. I've been a past president and board member of what was OFCED, the Development Council's predecessor name. I'm a member, actually the vice chair of the board for the Ottawa Police Foundation. I'm involved with them. I've been involved as a board member, past board member for Habitat for Humanity, Franklin County Historical Society, the Over the Road Gang Car Club that does the car show every year. I worked with them and helped get the cruise night started that they have, where they close off downtown and they have custom cars cruising through. I'm on the President's Advisory Council at Ottawa University, and generally just try to help out wherever we can. As a lawyer in a small town, you also do a number of kind of pro bono things for different groups to help them get started or keep them going. So I'm involved in that way as well. And some of that we can't talk about for attorney-client privilege, but we definitely try to stay involved in the community and give our best to these organizations who are trying to help other people.
As the interim economic director for the former CED, all right, I think I got
Development Council.
Development Council,
we'll
right.
Keep it short and sweet.
What are some things that you've seen in your experience that might need to be improved in the area, or what you would address first if you were elected?
With economic development statewide, I think one of the things we have to work on immediately is our workforce. Kansas has an incredible rate of workplace penetration. That is to say that we have a lot of people in the job force. We also educate a lot of people, but they leave. We actually import people to our state to utilize our public education and our state institutions like KU, K-State, Fort Hays, and others. And then we lose those people. They leave Kansas because they find economic opportunity elsewhere. So one of the things we have to do is to retain some of that workforce here. We have to train our workforce better. I'm a big fan of vocational education and the trades. We need to make sure not every kid's going to go to college, so we've got to make sure that we get alternative education for them so they can be productive and make money and have a good life. And then we've got to work on retaining and bringing jobs to Kansas. We've got good companies that are here now. We need to make sure that we do the things necessary to keep them here. And a lot of that is sometimes providing infrastructure and providing workforce. We need to do the things that's necessary to bring other businesses into the state. And good tax policy is a part of that. Making sites available is a part of that. And just letting people know that Kansas is business friendly.
Well, you kind of just touched on this, but I figured we'd ask you to delve a little bit more into it. How would you plan to bring in more jobs, some tangible goals or plans?
Well, we've got to use all the tools in our toolkit. You know, that includes using organizations like the Kansas City Area Development Council, who work closely with national site selectors. We need to make sure that we're talking with those site selectors as well, and that we're doing the things that will boost Kansas and put them on the map for businesses looking to locate here. We have an incredible opportunity in the eastern part of the state with the new intermodal that's going in right up the road from Ottawa. We've got to make sure our transportation network stays strong, that we have those infrastructure things that businesses look for. High-speed internet is going to be critical to a lot of businesses in terms of where they locate, and making sure that they have the labor. It cannot be overstated that the biggest things for businesses when they look to locate, they look at land availability, and then they look at workforce. And then they get down the specific list of items that are unique to their industry. If it's a distribution facility, they look at cost of freight, how quickly you can transport. If it's a facility like Amazon that ships all over the country, they need to know that they can get next day to a certain percentage of the country. So those factors are important, but they're kind of down chain factors. So we've got to make sure that we're looking at having a workforce there for them, and that we have sites that are served by infrastructure so we can make that happen.
In your Herald questionnaire, you mentioned that one of the issues that's important to you is pursuing excellence in education. How would you plan to pursue that excellence in education?
Well, you know, Article 6 of our state constitution, right after they get through the different branches of government and making sure everybody can vote, we talk about education. So it was one of the highest priorities for the founders of our state that we educate our young people. So I believe we have to have a combination of adequate funding and good expectations, strong expectations with metrics that we can measure. I have a daughter who's 12. She goes to a public school here in Ottawa, and they're constantly doing standardized tests. And I think we need to develop and look at other ways to measure the efficacy of education. We need to make sure that education is teaching kids what they need to know, but not at the expense of testing them to death. You know, my daughter comes home and they have scheduled days where they don't necessarily get to do everything they need to do because other classes are testing and they have to maintain quiet throughout the hallways. We shouldn't shortchange kids' education in order to have them take a standardized test. So metrics are huge for me. I want to make sure that when we graduate somebody from a Kansas high school, that they are as competitive as they can be in the global economy, that they have all the tools they need to either go to college or trade school, or if they're going to go out and start their own business. I think we have to build bridges between the business community and the educational community so that our kids have that leg up when they step out. I also support STEM initiatives, you know, science and technical education and mathematics. I think that we need to do more to make sure that we have kids coming out who are primed to go into the engineering field or into science. Bioscience is going to be huge in this area. So we need to make sure that we're implementing some of those innovative solutions from other states so that our kids are as competitive and educated as they can be.
Well, from your observations and experience, I know you just mentioned you have a daughter in the school system here. What are some of the necessary improvements? I know you kind of talked a little bit about making sure adequate funding is there.
It's adequate funding and accountability, so it's both of those things. The legislature this year made an increase in the base aid per pupil. I think that the current school finance formula is rather complex. I think for the average person, for me, for anybody to understand it, it takes a lot of study because there's different weightings for different factors, how far you bus children, whether they're low income, whether you have subsidized school lunch. There's all kinds of factors that go into that. I would like to see us look at ways to simplify that formula, make it easier to understand. I would like to see us have ways to make sure that the money we're investing in education, we're getting the output that we want for that. So that goes back to the accountability and deciding what those metrics are. I think we have to look beyond the base funding, and we have to look at specific initiatives in areas like I talked about, science and technology and mathematics. We need to make sure that those things are funded well. So those are kind of the specific areas that I would look for and include those sorts of things. We can't just keep throwing money at the problem and think that's it. You know, it's a combination of keeping the funding up, but also demanding the results for the money we put in.
Switch gears now a little bit toward the Kansas budget. The new Kansas budget was passed, and in that the legislature's research staff has projected that combination of income and sales tax cuts will spawn a large budget shortfall. Just wondering do you find any problems with the budget, and if so, what kind of suggestions would you have?
I do have a problem with it. I have a problem with it as a citizen. I have a problem with it as a father. I have a problem with it as somebody who's been involved in government. Good government doesn't kick the can down the road. We have way too much of that going on in Topeka and Washington today. We'll let somebody else worry about making the tough decision later. What this legislature did this time was to pass a huge tax cut while they continue to increase spending. I just talked about the fact that funding for schools went up even as they're taking this tax cut. The projections from the Legislative Research Department show that we are going to run into a shortfall. It's going to begin as early as 2014. And if we were allowed to have shortfalls year over year, which we're not in Kansas, but if we were allowed to, by 2017, I think it's a $2.7 billion deficit on a $6.2 billion budget. So we basically will be spending half again as much as our budget. That's unacceptable. And it was unacceptable for this legislature to take the governor's proposal, which included tax cuts and closing some loopholes to try to keep it revenue neutral, and just pass the tax cut part. It was a political stunt. The House suspended its rules and took the vote while the Senate was stalling, and a pox on both of their houses because they didn't do the right thing for the people of the state. I have huge problems with that.